Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Everything Dog Training with me, John McGuigan, Glasgow dog trainer and behaviour consultant. Welcome. Thanks for taking out your time out of your busy schedule to listen to us and listen to this interview. Welcome back if you're returning, and welcome if it's your first time. And as I say, I will never not say this, I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to listen to us. Your time is yours, and you gifting your time to listen to this information is massively appreciated. I always think that time's the only thing that we never get back. We've got a limited, we can always get more money. Okay, we can get more money, we could rob a bank if we needed to, but we can't have more time. Time is precious to us and we don't want to be wasting it, so I really appreciate you spending time listening to this interview. So really a treat for me, and it was a great interview with Paul. So I'm talking to Paul Owens, and Paul is the original dog whisperer. You can find information on his website, theoriginaldogwhisperer.com. Yep, originaldogwhisperer.com. Lots of he's got an advice blog, free videos there, and he is the author of 4 books. His first book was The Dog Whisperer, which predates The Other Dog Whisperer, and The Dog Whisperer is a compassionate and non-violent approach to training. He then followed that up with The Puppy Whisperer, which is a compassionate and non-violent guide to early training and care. Third book was Good Habits for Great Dogs, a positive approach to solving problems for puppies and dogs. And he's got his new book, which I'll talk about in just a second. So his first 2 books are kind of how to train a dog, how to train a puppy, and his third book is a little bit more conceptual, about how to build good habits in ourselves. Truly excellent books. I talk about the impact that his books have had in my life, and you'll hear that story during the podcast. And then his new book, which is called Training for the Joy of Dogs, 50 Lessons Learned, and it's just out celebrating 50 years of Paul's journey in dog training. I first came across Paul, as I'll not spoil the story just now because I talk about it later in the interview, because I shared it with Paul, and we have these moments in our life which are kind of crossroads moments, and I always think that they're interesting. I remember the film with Gwyneth Paltrow, Sliding Doors, where she misses a train on the tube in London, the underground in London, and the storyline splits at that point. So there's one storyline where she gets on the train, and the other storyline where she just misses it. The doors in the train close just as she arrives, and her life pans out in 2 completely different directions, and that's a fairly common parlance now, that kind of sliding doors moment. So even that there, okay, that Sliding Doors, that film has influenced our culture so much that we call that a sliding doors moment. Some of you might get that reference depending on your age, and some might not. However, okay, Paul Owens' book has been a sliding doors moment with me, and it helped me. So I'd already started the journey into positive training, and it helped me further along that journey, and yeah, so it was a real treat for me to talk to Paul. I just wanted to talk a little bit, just before we start the interview, the tagline in the book, okay, a compassionate and non-violent approach to training dogs. Why would we ever want to have a non-compassionate and violent approach to training dogs? Which is any time that we put a shock collar or a prong collar or a slip lead or a garrote collar or a choke chain in our dog. Use rattle cans. Okay, so rattle cans not violent. Okay, it's not physically violent, but it is not compassionate. So if we raise our voice, we're not showing our dogs compassion, and if we use violence, we're certainly not. Okay, so it's a lovely byline to his book, and I think if we can sum up our lives with our dogs, that would be a really good mantra to live by: a compassionate and non-violent approach to dog training, or even dog teaching. All right, so real treat. I know I've said that before, but I hope you like the interview. As before, as I've said, if you want to get in touch with me, I had somebody email me today about the last podcast I did, so massive thanks. That was the one from last week's episode with Eileen Koval talking about snake avoidance, and somebody had mentioned me. In fact, I'll give them a mention. It was Sinead. Okay, so thanks, Sinead. And Sinead has said that, and we've got the island of Arran, which is just off the west coast here, so it's not far from us actually, in Glasgow. And there's lots of adders there, and quite a few dogs being bitten. So I know that I'd said that it's rare. It still is statistically rare, but we've certainly got adders, which is a poisonous snake, venomous snake in the UK. They are rare, and the snakes are rare, and the bites are rare, but that doesn't mean that they don't happen, and it's not important when they do. So thanks for your feedback, Sinead. You can get me email info@glasgowdogtrainer.co.uk. You can get me at Glasgow Dog Trainer on Facebook, Instagram, and on YouTube. And yeah, leave a review for me if you're on iTunes. Positive reviews, please, rather than this is a lot of rubbish, and I object to everything that this man has ever said. If that's the case, just don't waste your time listening to me. And yeah, you can leave comments on Spotify on there. So any feedback's good. Not any feedback's good. Positive, constructive feedback is good. So let's get into the interview. Thanks, guys.
So thanks, Paul. It's a massive honour for me to get you on to and talk about a variety of things. So yeah, we're really delighted that you gave us the time. So thank you. You're in Los Angeles just now?
Yeah, I'm in Los Angeles. Yes.
Yeah. But you're Ohio. You're from Ohio originally.
I was born and raised in Ohio, so we call it the Midwest here. So I'm an old guy from the Midwest, so I get goofy. So just bear with me.
That's all right. Now let's tell me a little bit about. So you've been a positive trainer for a long time, but you weren't always a positive trainer. So I want to ask you a couple of questions about your journey. What made you change over first?
I wrote about this in my very first book, is that as we get a little bit older, we look at the world a little differently. And I had been practicing yoga for many years, and I've been jerking dogs on leash from 1974 to like 1988. Didn't use treats. And in 1975, I had a golden retriever who eventually went on to become nationally recognized for how obedient she was. She wasn't trained with treats. So I got really good at doing it. Well, my brother asked me to come over, and I left it for just a couple of years. I left training for a couple of years, and my brother said, I got a new dog. He's just barking. And I said, oh, I'll come over and help. And as soon as the dog barked, I jerked him on a leash, because I've been doing that for 14 years. And I had all this muscle memory, just jerking the dogs. And the leash just flew from my hand. I said, what the hell am I doing? And it's no way to treat a family member and a friend. And so I had an epiphany from, this isn't property, this is a member of your family. And so I had to go back to school to learn to never hit, kick, shock, jerk, pin a dog to the ground, use leash corrections or anything. So it's, I guess, Mother Nature just, Mother Nature's the evolution. We evolve, and hopefully we wake up soon enough to realize that these are sentient beings, and they shouldn't be treated like that. And so it was just an epiphany for me, John.
And it was in that moment, yeah?
Yeah, one moment. Boop.
Okay.
And I just didn't do it, yeah.
Why do you think that from all the times that, and that's, because I know how I treated my dogs, and 20 years ago doing the same thing, and I still feel, and it's, it's to your eternal shame, actually, isn't it?
Yeah. Your heart.
Yeah. And I mean, you can probably hear it in my voice just thinking about that. Just
I know. I'm with you.
Yeah. So, out of all the times that you had corrected, euphemistically corrected your dog on with a collar correction before, what do you think was the difference between your dogs previously and that one moment?
I look, you've been around a while like I have, and I think it's two sides of a coin. On one side of the coin, and as a trainer, whether you're a dog trainer or anything else, but as a trainer, the very first thing is education. I needed to be educated. I was blind. I was ignorant to what I was doing. I was getting results because my dogs would do all the things I asked them to do. But the education part is one, but the other side of the coin, this two-headed coin, is empathy. So it's mind or science and heart, empathy. Yeah. And one fascinating thing as I got into this, John, I found out that the heart has a brain also. So I don't know, you're familiar with this, of course, but we have all these neurons up here figuring things out. But we have neurons in our heart also, which inform the head of what to do based on feeling. It's amazing. And so it took a long time for me to realize that holistic dog training was the way to go. So versus what I did 50 years ago to what I do now, it's looking at the whole package, not just that the dog's in front of you doing something. It's why is the dog doing it? What do you want your dog to do? And how do you get him to do it? Just like how do you get yourself to do it without using pain or violence or fear?
Yeah, I know. And it's because it's that question, you know, I remember, so you get the Brazilian. I try not to mention Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's my other passion in life, right? I try not to mention it in every podcast, right? But the BJJ community is huge in California. It's where the Brazilians came. That's where when they first moved out of Brazil. And it was interesting. I listened to one with basically the sons of, there was the two brothers who they're born in the 1910s and 1920s, and they're since passed, but their sons are now in their 70s and 80s, you know, moving into their 80s. And I listened to a podcast with Hickson Gracie, and he was talking about that when you become older, you can become softer, right? And he talks about empathy and love a lot in this podcast. But I read the books from when he was in his 30s and 40s, and he was an animal.
Brutal.
And it's weird because he's got these, I actually think they're probably rose-colored glasses that he's fondly remembering things that haven't happened, because he doesn't want to, he's trying to reconcile, I was a bad person then, or I had bad elements to my character. And we don't want to think about that because we think we're good people who love dogs.
I had a client just yesterday. She's 80 years old, and she's talking about how old she is and she can't do things. I said, "You're talking to me. You know, I'm 5 years behind you. I'm 75, basically." And the things that we're talking about here, John, nobody's heard before, which is, and I'll give you the classic example. This is stuff you're familiar with, but there's only two secrets in dog training to make it really easy for me when I heard this, and you and I just passed this stuff along. The two big secrets of dog training are, number one, dogs are transactional. Whoever has the most money, canine currency, that's who the dog listens to. So in the books I talk about, if you have real chicken, turkey, cheese, hamburger, steak, bacon, roast beef, hot dogs, whatever, you are worth $10,000 to $20,000. If you have dry treats, you're worth $1,000 to $10,000. And when you first get a dog, your price is worth 50 cents. And the reason I explain this to people is that Mother Nature, in the form of other dogs, cats, squirrels, new people coming in the house, is a $50,000 distraction. So the very first thing that people have to do is elevate their value. And you can elevate the value by either using what are called primary reinforcers, stuff the dog really likes.
Yeah.
Food the dog really likes until, you don't want to have to carry chicken around with you for the rest of your life. But in the beginning, you have to elevate your value either through positive methods or through negative methods. And this kind of refers back to your previous question. The reason dogs listened to us was out of fear. They were going to be hit. They were going to be jerked on a leash. That's how I learned from my dad, how he learned from his dad. Or you can raise your value positive or negative. And when people hear that for the first time, I had one client, I'm getting long-winded here, I'm old.
No, don't worry. Good stuff.
I had one client, he says, this prevention and management that you're talking about, he said, it's ruining my relationship with my dog. My dog needs to know that he displeased me. And I said, it's a different philosophy on life. And as my great aunt in my book, you might have read, I had an Aunt Angela. She was marvelous. I wish everybody had an Aunt Angela in their life. She said, whenever you meet a person, be kind, be respectful, help them out if you can, but don't be stupid. My aunt was pretty direct.
Yeah.
And,
She's Scottish.
What's that? Yeah. Probably. But yeah, that's funny. And I use that exact same phrase when I talk to people. I said, you have a dog in front of you. You don't know whether they're safe or they're not safe. Be kind, be respectful, help the dog out if you can. But you don't know who or what you have standing in front of you. So be cautious, be safe.
Yeah.
And say, well, you have to tell the dog where all this is going, where you have to tell the dog, well, what they're doing is unacceptable and they will be punished for that. And I said, does that work? Yes. However, there's a lot of collateral damage. And the collateral damage, now I'm finally coming around the bend here. The collateral damage is not only what you're doing to the dog, it's what you're doing to yourself.
Yeah.
If you close off your evolution of heart, then, and all you're doing is the science part of it by correcting the dog and getting him to do what you want, you said you're capping your own particular growth, emotional growth, intellectual growth, but especially your heart. And so I would sum up this whole thing of be positive, but don't be permissive, because safety is good, not only for yourself, but for the dog. But think about what it's doing to you. And I think people just get desensitized. They said, hey, this works, so I'm just going to do it. So,
yeah. And I mean, we could talk a lot more about lots of the things that you've said there, you know. So, how is your journey? So when did you change? When was that incident with your brother's puppy? When was that?
1988. I
Okay.
still remember it. Yeah, 1988. And I want to give a big shout out. I mentioned to you earlier that all you and I do, and the trainers that have been around a while do, we're just passing along what we learned from other people, the great trainers and everything. And one of the first people I called, I heard of a woman by the name of Terry Ryan. And I said, well, I'll call her up and I'm going to ask her about this positive dog training stuff. She was so gracious and she didn't hesitate. She spent 40 minutes on the phone talking to me about positive dog training. This is back in the late 80s. And she talked about her chicken training camps.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, cool. And that was my evolution to that. So that was back in 1988. But it took me 3 years to take all the muscle memory from this arm, because I did hundreds of thousands of leash corrections over the previous 14 years. And when I tell people, it simply takes time to change habits. And they go, oh man, I didn't know it was going to take all this time. I said, if you're learning to play an instrument, if you're learning to learn a new language, it just takes time and repetition. So be as kind and as patient with yourself as you are with your dog. There's no quick fix.
Yeah. And that, on that point of that muscle memory that you've built into, imagine you'd been driving a car for 14 years and then I changed the pedals from, instead of being brake and accelerator, change them round. And then plus, if you've got a stick shift, you've then got the clutch, and I now change 3 pedals. You're going to go, when you're under pressure, you're going to go back to the old way.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly. My roommate, loved dearly, lived together for 10 years. She changed the clock on our kitchen wall 9 months ago. After 9.5 years, or so. I'm still looking at every once in a while at the old wall.
Yeah.
And I think what you just brought up is really important, is the fact that science is science. It just simply takes time for new neural pathways to grow. That's it. And people still want a quick fix, but that's it. Oh, thank you for your great Scottish patience.
Not at all.
The second secret of dog training, the first is dogs are transactional. The second is dogs are contextual. And when you and I and all the dog trainers mention this to people, that if you meet somebody at work and then you see that person in a supermarket a month later, they look familiar, but you can't quite place it, you have to reintroduce yourself. Yeah. Actors do dress rehearsals for the same reason. You can memorize everything, but you're in a new situation and you forget the words. And people understand that. Well, what does it have to do with the dog? If you teach your dog to sit on carpeting and then you go in the kitchen with a tile or a linoleum floor with a bunch of new sounds and smells and you say sit, the dog says, sounds familiar, but I really don't know what you're talking about. There's not enough neural connections. And that seems to resonate with people. Well, that makes sense because just because a dog will do it in one situation doesn't mean they'll do it in another. Be patient. And you have to be as patient with yourself as you are with your dog. So,
and to expand on that, we've got, so you've got, those would be the technical skills for what the dog is actually doing. But then you, and the way that I explain it to clients is you learning how to play the piano. Yep, you learn how to play the piano, great. Playing a piano in front of 4,000 people is a different thing altogether.
That's it. Yeah. Expecting a dog to sit and stay and look at you and do oh, there's your dog. Hooray. To sit and stay and do all this stuff when squirrels are running by or there's joggers or there's motorcycles. It's exactly right. You can get them to do it. It's just that you have to do it incrementally, grade level by grade level. You're absolutely right. And so in my book, my new book, I talk about there's no such thing as a stubborn dog. It doesn't exist. The only reason a dog won't do what you ask them to do is A, they have no idea what you're talking about in that situation, or B, you don't have enough money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
or the dog hasn't learned that if I do this, I get paid well enough.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah. And then the first thing that people come up with, I don't know whether your audience here are people who's just getting started. So I just pretend, let me digress for a moment. The very first time I walked into a home with a psychiatrist, I said, what are you doing hiring me? Dude, you got a PhD in this stuff. Healthcare workers, women who have, there's one woman here in LA, she is very, very well known. She had a daycare center for 3, 4, 5-year-olds. And then they grew up, they had kids, they sent their kids to her. And she was a great grandma by that time. And she called me up, she said, I have problems with my dog. I go over there and the place is immaculate and it feels fun. And the people are there all smiling. And it was just a great thing. She takes me to the back and there's her boxer with a shock collar on, barking at people going by. People, psychiatrists, psychologists, whatever, it's just like me. If I'm in a new situation, you need to relate. And I said, what do you do if your children are acting up? She said, we have a saying. It's called redirection, not correction. And I let that sink in for a while. And so she brought the dog in, she took the shock collar off, and she said, yeah, but what do I do? I said, you do the same thing you do with your kids. Teach them what you want them to do instead of what you want them to stop doing. It's like an epiphany, like I had an epiphany all those years. And slowly but surely, things are changing.
What's interesting about that scenario that you've just given us there, so we talked about that it's contextual for the dog.
Yeah.
But you just said it's exactly contextual for the person as well, because they can't relate that to that. It's the same thing. You know.
That is so great. I'm going to use that. So I'm stealing your material.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, I never put it to that. I told the woman yesterday, I said, you're a grandma. The 80-year-old client I had, yes, I said, you're a grandma. I said, you just take your grandma radar skills that you have for your grandchildren and include your dog in there. And all this is going to make sense. Prevention and management for safety. Teach the dog what you want him to do instead. Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, thanks. I have my moments.
Blind squirrel finds nut. Yeah, all right.
Right, so you moved into positive training in 1989, so 35 years? Yeah, 35 years ago. Okay. Where's that journey taking you? How have you evolved in that time? So I know so I've been doing this since probably professionally in some way for about 16, 17 years. And I keep all my old YouTube videos, they're all there. And when I look at the ones past, I go, I don't do that anymore, you know? So in what ways have you evolved in the last 35 years?
I think it goes back to, it's a great question. I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is the fact that the science has progressed so much over the last 50 years. You know, why do dogs do what they do? The greatest example of that I did a seminar on a dog's memory and how it affects behavior 3 or 4 years ago. So I went on the internet to find out what's what and what has changed over all the years. And this woman, this PhD, is given this class for humans. And she said, and you can never forget that up to 95% of learning is unconscious. I go, time out. I replayed it and replayed it and replayed it. Up to 95% of all learning is unconscious. And she said, it is true that you learn things while you sleep, because the part of the human brain replays and rehearses everything, all the information, everything that came in during the day. It replays and rehearses it to see whether or not our brain should hold on to it. And so I did the seminar on your dog learns to sit while they sleep. And I said, all you have to do is sprinkle the training throughout the day, exactly like you would growing a tomato plant. I used to grow tomato plants. I said, you don't stand out there 24 hours a day, water it and keep talking to it and singing to it. I'm weird. And doing all this stuff. You just go out there every once in a while, give it the nutrients that it needs. And all of a sudden, as if by magic, there's a little tomato. Yeah. And people relate to this. And I ask whether or not they play an instrument or they speak a language. And the example that I give, I said, so you're learning how to speak Spanish. So you've been practicing, and all of a sudden, as if by magic, somebody comes up to you and says, hola. And without thinking about it, something you've never done before, you go, hola, me llamo Pablo, ¿cómo está usted? And then you're so surprised that you're able to do it. Mother Nature does up to 95% of the work for us. Get out of her way and let her do the things. Don't get stressed about it. That closes it all down. So the science part of it has been really big. But again, the heart part of it has gotten big too. And the practical application of that, of people having empathy for dogs, is hundreds of millions of dogs have been saved over the last 50 years because people have opened up their hearts. And you've got no-kill shelters. You've got people fostering the dog. It wasn't until the mid-90s that people started using treat dispensing toys. And that became a big thing. So that whole evolution of saying, oh, we should look at the whole package, the science as well as the heart. And then you get everything you wanted with your dog, the relationship you want with your dog. It just takes time.
Yeah. And it's that consistent, regular practice. It just doesn't have to be for hours at a time, eh?
How many hours?
So it doesn't have to be for hours at a time. It's just that sticking in the repetitions.
Yeah, boy. Yeah, right. Obviously, right. Again, you and I are on the same page. One of the big evolutions for me is to try to make dog training part of your everyday life. And those are just empty words. And then you demonstrate it. I said, so for instance, I'm talking to you. And so I say, stay to the dog. I'm teaching the dog to stay. I stand up and sit back down and give the dog a treat. You're watching television. You're on the computer. You have guests over. You're eating dinner. One of the things we teach dogs in our classes, it's on the videos in the video library, is what do you want your dog to do instead of beg at the table? You want them to run to their bed the moment you sit on their sit. The moment you sit at the table, you want them to run to their bed. People say, well, then what? I said, throw them a treat. I learned never to feed the dog from the table. I go, yes, you do. If your dog's 6 feet away and lying down, throw them treats. And then after a while, you don't have to use treats anymore.
Yeah.
And so make it part of your everyday life. And if it's fun for you, now we get back to the whole motivation thing. If it's fun for you, you're more motivated to do it and spend more time with your dog. And so that evolution, you are going to spend more time with your dog, and you're going to want to spend more time with your dog because you guys are forming a bond. And that's the heart part of it. So I forget a lot. Go ahead.
No, you go. I'm going to say.
I said, sometimes when I start talking, I forget where I was.
Oh, don't worry. So I had I recorded another pod. So the two podcasts I kind of do, I'll do one with guests, and then I'll do one when I'm speaking on my own. And I did one this afternoon. I recorded it 4 times, and it's still not right. And I was swinging away in tangents here, and I need to make notes, stay on track. You know, oh, I've got a thought about that, and then you forget what you were talking about in the first place. you know.
Drop the mic. Let's both leave.
Right. I want to circle back round to when you were saying that when that muscle memory that you were using.
Yeah.
Is there any way that we can? What are the strategies that we can do in order to help speed that up to? Because it's not just, there are things that we can do rather than just letting it play its course. You know, there's other things that we can do. So what kind of things do you practice, or do you recommend that other people do?
Are you talking about for the dog or for the person?
For the person.
I learned long ago for me, and everybody has their own way of learning. Some people I'm a visual guy. I need to see it, because I don't know if when I read it in a book, I can't translate that in my mind. I said, what specifically are you trying to do? And so what I tell people to do is, when you have your dog, first, make a list of exactly what you want your dog to learn how to do. Make a list of exactly all the behaviors you don't want. So now it's clear in your mind. It isn't so overwhelming. But then make a list about what's doable for you, what's realistically doable for you. For example, all dogs can improve, and behavior can improve, and you can live long and happily ever after. But there are many dogs that can't happen to it, because people can't do it because they're elderly, or they've got kids in the family, and you've got a 150-pound Mastiff in the house that's knocking the kids over. So there are safety factors, which is number one. It isn't realistically doable. You can't turn that behavior around because of the environment that you're in, and safety is number one. And so by making a list, you can help clarify things a little bit. Is this realistically doable for me? For people who are interested in this, I have a free handout with this article on it. But just to touch bases very quickly, do you have the time to put in? For instance, I'm an old guy, and when I get a new puppy, I'm a professional dog trainer. Can I handle that? Sure, I can. Is it realistically doable? Not so much anymore, because dogs are underfoot, and I don't move the way I used to. I used to work with really dangerous dogs. And one day, I looked at this dog, and I knew the dog was about to bite me. Now, I've been doing this for years, and it was really, really interesting to me to say, wow, my mind observed that I was about to be bitten, and my arm didn't move.
Yeah.
I knew it was time to get out of doing dangerous dogs and everything. I just don't have the reflexes. So if it's realistically doable, do you have the time to spend in? Do you have the environment? If your grandma's living with you and you have dogs that just bounce around and knock you over all the time and jump on you, it's a safety concern. Do you have the money? Because if you have a special needs dog that needs more attention, you're going to have to pay somebody like us to come out and help you out with that. So it's time, you have the money, do you have the environment? And one of the most important ones is and skills. You have to develop the skills for it. Well, one of the most important ones is, do you have the emotional wherewithal to handle it? Because if you're really stressed that your dog is going to bite another dog, or is making the old dog in the family really stressed out, which is going to affect their longevity, maybe this isn't a great, you're worried. You're worried all the time. You're worried about whether your dog is messing around and doing all this stuff. It affects your work. It affects your relationships. So if you look at these 5 different things, and again, if people want the free handout, happy to send it to them.
I'll link that in the show notes. We'll get the details off you there.
Yeah. Doable? Yeah. Realistically doable? Not so much. Write it down. Is this realistic for you? What do you want your dog to do? What do you want your dog not to do? And is it realistically doable for you?
Yeah.
And so by writing it down, it takes a lot of pressure off. You've had clients, I'm getting long-winded again. You've had clients where all of a sudden they'll say, well, my dog's doing this. And you start to explain it. Yeah, but what about this? And I said, let's deal with this first. Well, what about this? And everything, one by one.
Yeah. What I find interesting as well was, and Ian, you will not mind me, telling you this. So I saw Ian Dunbar a few years ago, and we're friends as well now. And he gave a seminar on dealing with problem behaviors, and at the end, this couple, and God love them, they came up and they said, but what about this? you know, and they'd been waiting for him to articulate their dog, a male dog, that age with a couple in that specific example. And there was that disconnect between, but there's core principles and underlying concepts to this. And if we learn them, we can apply them. But they'd just been waiting to, and because they didn't hear it, they were then not, they weren't listening to the other stuff. That's just part of learning, isn't it?
Yep. You know as well as I do what we try to do, and people do this in other walks of life and everything, is that I start my training sessions and I say, now this is going to be a lot of material. Don't try to remember it. I said, I'm going to leave you with 3 things. I'm going to give you a lot more than that, but when I leave again, I'm going to repeat these 3 things. And that allows the brain to just sit back and watch the movie, which is what I tell people. Just pretend you're watching your movie, watching a movie, because Mother Nature is going to take all the information in and figure it out for you. But when I leave, I'm going to repeat 3 things to do. And what that does is takes a lot of pressure off. And I send them a comprehensive review about it, and I send them videos about it and everything. But just remember these 3 things. And the 3 things is, number 1, prevention and management, set up an environment for safety. Number 2, set up the environment so your dog thinks that this is Disneyland. This is the best, happiest, safest place in the world. And number 3, teach your dog what you want them to do instead. So it has to do with safety, it has to do with feeling, and it has to do with specific behaviors. And then I give an example of that. You want your dog to sit before you go out the door. Mother Nature, you can see I'm on a soapbox now. Mother Nature, she does all the work for us. You just have to get out of her way and let her do it. So 3 things. Yeah,
that's awesome. Okay, this is your 4th book you've got coming
out? This is the 4th, yeah.
And it's quite different from your other 3. So was the Dog Whisperer first, then the Puppy Whisperer?
Yeah, you're right on as usual. Yeah, it's Dog Whisperer was first, the Puppy Whisperer was second. I had another book that came out, it's called Good Habits for Great Dogs. It didn't do as well, but it had to do with forming habits for dogs, like forming habits for yourself. I realized it was too much of a jump for people. Hey, just tell me how to get my dog to sit. Heck with these habits thing. But this is the 4th one.
So the first 2 were kind of how-to books?
Yes.
And then the 3rd one's been kind of more conceptual?
Yeah, exactly right. There was some how-to stuff in it. And the 4th one, the 3rd one had some how-to stuff. But I tried to introduce the whole process of what we're talking about. Think about what you want to have happen, make it a habit for yourself, make it happen. Didn't work. The 4th one, however, has to do with, it's kind of a celebration of my 50 years. I tell stories about many of the clients that I've had, the programs that I've worked with, the behavioral programs for 4 of the nonprofits that I've been with that are going strong. One's a prison program. One is, matter of fact, my dear roommate has a program called the Canine Youth Alliance, kids or dogs helping kids helping dogs helping kids. And so she works with rescue dogs and kids that are in after school programs to teach them about safety and empowerment. So that's what this book is about. But if I can hawk it for a second.
Of course.
When I was young, I don't know if they had this in Scotland, but when I was young, they used to have cartoons that would play on television about stories like Bambi. Disney had a lot of them and stuff like that. And then they would send you the book. It was a full color book that you could page through, and you're a kid, 4, 5, 6 years old. And they would send you, it was called a 45. It was a little record that you could play on your cheap little phonograph. And so while you were turning the pages, you could hear the story in your head. Well, I love that. And so I said, well, why don't we do a dog book like that? And so that's what it's just an introduction to it. So while you're reading something in this new book, you can actually click and it will go to that spot so you can see what the heck we're talking about on the video. So we'll see if it works or not, but I think everybody should write a book like you should write a book like that. You know, do a how-to book that's read and watch and everything. I'm getting long-winded again. So, but anyhow, yeah. So I'm really happy that it came out like that. Whether it resonates or not, I don't know. But it's a joy because I'm celebrating my 50 years.
Yeah, awesome. When you were saying, so you've got a program, so we've got Pause for Peace is one of them.
Pause for Peace in my kids program. Yeah.
Okay. And what's the objectives for that? What were the kids learning?
Yeah, boy. I don't know if you had a chance to page through it yet, but
yeah, I read that story. Yeah.
Yeah, some of them are heartbreaking, but they're all empowering. And so that's what we try to do. I'll give you a very, very quick story. So one of my dogs was a 110-pound golden retriever. You're going to like this story because you have such a big heart. So there's a big 110-pound dog, and they would have jobs day. What do you want to be when you grow up? And so they would have people from various parts of life come in, and and I love those things. You just go into school, and there was a police officer, tall guy, a couple of guys, and they're all dressed in black, and so they're going to talk about whatever the heck they're talking about. You want to be a cop when you grow up. And then there was a woman from Disney, she's a very smartly dressed woman, and she was talking about what she did. And I'm standing out in the hall, and I said, well, we're following them. This ought to be interesting. And so whenever you walk in with a dog, there are some people that are afraid of dogs, some kids, 3rd, 4th, 5th graders are my favorite. And they're always in the back of the room. And when you see a big dog, well, that's a whole different story. So I come in, and the very first thing I say is, now, Grady, he loves children. He doesn't bite. If you want to, you can pet him after class. I said, but he gets a little excited when he comes into class too. Will you help him relax a little bit? And so I hand treats to everybody, and especially the kids that are in the back of the room that are afraid of the dog. And I say, what I'd like you to do is say, Grady, find it. And so the child who's in the back and feels protected because there's so much distance between this big dog and themselves goes, Grady, find it, and throws a treat up. And Grady was taught to never move unless it was safe. Sometimes kids throw a treat and it hits the other kid in the back of the head. So So Grady finds it, and that is when the magic happens, John. Mother Nature, in the form of this huge, big teeth, big head dog, has just connected to Mother Nature, and this is now cycling back to what we were talking about earlier, in the child. A bridge is formed, and then fear is replaced with curiosity. And that's the key. And this is what you and I teach people. Fear and fun cannot exist in the same space at the same time. And so we do the whole class, and Grady does all his tricks, and the kids do all of it. And then I go up and down the aisles, and everybody's petting Grady. He's so big, there's like 12 hands on him at the same time. And I said, now listen, whatever you guys decide to do with your life, just remember 3 things. I said, number 1, make sure it's something that you love. Number 2, make sure it makes a contribution to the world. Even if you're a barista, you're helping somebody out. Make sure you're helping somebody in some way. And number 3, you got to get paid for it so you can do the first 2. Yeah. And then I end with, you were able to get this big dog to sit, to lie down, to play dead, to shake hands, to take a bow and do all these tricks. And you never had to say no. You never had to hit them, kick them, yell at them, or anything. And they did it all for you. Imagine what you can do with your brothers and sisters and friends.
Yeah.
Then it makes sense.
Yeah.
So we just need to make the connections. There's the education part, and the other side of the coin was the emotional part, which helps you get motivated to do something.
Yeah, that's lovely. It reminded me of, I don't know if you know how much of our culture that you know of, especially in the West. So Glasgow's the biggest city in Scotland. So Scotland's 5.5 million people or something like that. It's not big. And Glasgow's the biggest city, and I think it's 800,000 or something like that. That's thereabouts. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, from the 1950s up until the early noughties, in the west of Scotland, mainly in Glasgow, but in the west of Scotland, for a variety of reasons, we had horrible problems with, they called it recreational violence between young men. All right. And there were gang fights, but not the same as you get gang fights in the big cities in the States, where it's turf war over drugs and things like that. Yeah. It was just bored young men, children and young men, from having these factions, and the faction could be 2 different streets. At one end of the housing estate or the housing project, and they're at the other, and then they would meet in the middle and stab each other, right? So I mean, it wasn't just fist fights. It was, and I remember them when I was a cop. You would And it was just normal. This is just what we did, right? And not we did this. I didn't, because I grew up in a nicer place. But it's an interesting book. I'll send you the reference for it. It's called he was a career detective and he finished up as a boss. And he had gone to a social work an American social worker had come over and was giving him an input on violence. And he said at the time, if our gun laws in here were the same as they were in the US, we would have had a higher murder rate than the Bronx at the time in the 90s. Right? I mean, horrendous, right? And he started looking at it from a multi-agency approach. So he looked at housing, education, the courts, prison service, police, social work, probation office, providing, understanding good nutrition within the home, understanding the role of stress within the home, right? And we don't have it anymore.
Wow.
Yeah, it took about 10 years, right?
He was ahead of his time.
Oh, the man's, I'll send you some stuff. You remember Anthony Bourdain, the chef?
Who?
Anthony, is it Bourdain? He died a few years ago.
Oh, yeah.
So when he came to Glasgow, he interviewed John, and I'll find the YouTube link for it and send it to you. And John's this, and but what, just this will bring me on to what we were talking about before we started recording. He was this, I mean, I worked with these guys. I remember them being in awe of these men when I was a young cop. You know, these hardened city detectives. You know, and I spoke to him on the phone, and he said to me, "Do you know the single biggest thing that you can do for a child is smile at them because of the release of hormones." Right? He says, and it might be the only time that child gets that in a day. So when you're looking at bringing those dogs into the classroom, the child's able to innocently interact with that dog without stress. You know, it's all about love and empathy, kindness, you know, and it's just think about so that's what the child learning from the dog, as well as all those other things. It's wonderful.
Yeah, what the child learns from the dog, I'm a storyteller, so I love your story. It's great, but it really sums up everything we've just been talking about. It's a holistic approach. Diet, that guy was way ahead of his time.
Oh yeah.
And so in the book, and there's another free thing for people who are watching this. It's called the 9 ingredients I came up with like 30 years ago, and it's everything you just mentioned. Food, play, socialization, quiet time, exercise. Give your dog a job to do, or they become self-employed as gardeners, home decorators, and everything. And that's what was with the kids in the thing. They didn't have anything to do to take that energy. So somebody like that, and what you're doing, big time applause.
Yeah, he's a wonderful human. He's one of these guys that it's kind of like, you know, when you get touched by these, and it can be so brief.
Yeah. You're right. You're right.
You know,
just
so
a moment.
that you know,
moments matter. Yeah, that's great stuff.
Yeah.
Well, it's great. Just solving all the problems of the universe here.
So I'm going to tell the story because I told you before we started recording. So this is just for other people to listen to. So, you know, I started my police career in 1992 as a part-time police officer while I was at university. And then I joined the police in 1997. And I'd met this guy, Andy, who actually, how I knew him was I was assaulted when I was 18. I got mugged in the street, and Andy was a detective in charge of the case. So, and then when I started as a part-time cop, he was in the office one night, and I said hello to him, and he remembered who I was. And we our paths crossed, you know, touched at various times throughout our career. And he was this big rugby player guy, you know, and he was like the big city detective, you know, tall, big, you know, big lifted weights, you know, and tough guy. And he'd bought a new Labrador puppy. And I'd gone into his office one afternoon to talk to him, and your book was sitting on his desk. And I said, and this was when I was just changing from leaving an aversive approach, and I was starting to move into positive training. And I said to him, what does he say? What does this guy say about corrections? He says he doesn't even mention them, you know. And I was like, how does that work? Because everything I'd done before there was compulsion-based training, you
Yep.
know. And he says, it's not, he doesn't even mention it. And I says, how does it? And he said, just read his book. And I was like, oh, wow.
In Scotland. Go figure.
Yeah, I know. So,
yeah,
yeah.
I'm a firm believer that the universe has a great sense of humor. And all of a sudden, something will show up. And, well, how did that happen? It's like a book falls off a shelf and hits you in the head. And it's the book.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that.
It's being open to it as well, though. So it's when you're talking about opening your heart, it's opening your heart and your mind to seeing these things, these opportunities.
Yeah. You got. Well, that's why you're so successful. But you didn't. It took you one moment. We can edit this.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, I'm back.
So let's pause there just for a second, just so I can see it on the histogram. Okay.
Be aware for the moments. This is something else. Again, somebody passed along to me so many years ago. If something doesn't seem to fit and it's worthless, you can throw it out. But if something seems interesting, put it on a shelf here, because you never know what just happened might lead you in another direction. Oops. And so I think living in the one of the big things that dogs teach us is just live in the moment, but that's easier said than done, but we do the best we can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Okay, I've got a couple more questions. I'm
Sure.
conscious of your time. Okay. Somebody had I try not let stuff on social media, but it's my own page, right? So I have to moderate it to some degree, right? I'd put a video up the other day, and we're working with a spaniel who was she's wary of other dogs and she's lunging and barking. So we're doing some nice work, and the training was lovely. I mean, I know, even if I do say it myself, it was nice training, right? And somebody commented and said, if you train a dog properly, you don't need food. Right. Now, what he'd alluded to a whole bunch of other things, but he started with, dogs as being, you having to be the alpha and in charge of the dog and stuff, which leads me to believe that he's starting to use more of compulsion there. So there's more an aversive approach there. So how do you explain that to people when you've got this, and it's still, we're combating it to a huge degree. We've made massive inroads, but when you still get this training the dog properly, what do you say to that? How do you explain that?
I really empathize with it, because I used to be that way. And so I don't add any kind of confrontation to it. And I just say, here's what I learned. Let me show you. Yeah, and okay. For example, ask your dog to sit. Now, I did this a couple of times, and I realized I was making the people feel uncomfortable, because sometimes the husbands would take me aside and said, my dog does everything for me. It's just my wife and my kids, And so I said, all right, I'll tell you what, ask your dog to sit. And the dog wouldn't sit because I was holding a piece of chicken over here. So I never put anybody on the spot like that. I demonstrated. I said, in the beginning, if you want your dog to do something you want, and now we've come full circle, dogs are transactional. Whoever has the most amount of money. Can you get the dog to do it by force and fear? Yes, you can. It works. However, can you get the dog to do it using positive means? Let me demonstrate. And you, as a professional dog trainer, one of the things that I show, the big, what's the word I want to use? Mind opener for people. I say, for instance, what I'm about to show you is I'm going to put this chicken on the floor. And within 1 minute, your dog won't touch it without me having to hit him, kick him, shock him, shake him, jerk him, threaten him, or do anything. And invariably, both people in the house, all the kids are really interested, but both people cross their arms, cross their legs, and lean back. You haven't met my dog yet. Now, obviously, we do this with safety. We recognize dogs that are if they're going to get really grumpy about doing something like this, you don't do it. But if people go to my website, you'll see me doing this with a woman, and it's an absolutely authentic reaction when all we're doing is teach and leave it. And within 60 seconds, the dog won't touch the treats. And then I said, that's how you train a dog. So it's prevention and management. Teach the dog what you want them to do rather than stopping them from doing something by threats or anything. And then you get to where you want to go. And then, and again, long-winded here, you have to address the thing of if you train a dog the right way, you can do it through fear and punishment. You can do it through positive methods. But then you always have to say, but you don't want to have to carry chicken around with you for the rest of your life. You just have to form the brain pathway. And then it's like playing the lottery. You don't have to pay people to play the lottery. You know, people say, oh, eventually I anticipate I might get this, so I'm going to work harder. And that's the science part of it. And that's what I tell people. And that's it. Here's what I learned from the science. Let me demonstrate it. And that's the moment you were talking about, because it shows people that there is a possible way of doing things without having to use it. Yeah.
I've been playing the lottery here since 1995. Never won it.
Well, since 1995?
Yeah. I've never won it. Never won it. Still play every week.
Yeah, I haven't won $5 on that thing, so I stopped playing. I said, you know, that it's like an addiction.
Yeah, I know. The thing is that the day that I stop playing it, my numbers will come up.
Of course. And then you look at mother, and you look at the universe again, and go, that sense of humor.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Okay. So what I do at the end is ask one of my previous guests to leave a question for a next guest. Okay. We'll talk a little. Right. So I've got a question to ask, which I just need to find. All right. So what moment in your life we probably talked about this, I think. This is actually it's pretty good foreshadowing that he's given us here. What moment in your life do you believe defines the path that you're currently taking?
That was the one we talked about earlier, about when I was training my brother's dog and I did a leash correction when the dog barked and I just threw the leash out of my hand. I said, what the heck am I doing? So that was mine. What was yours?
A lot of small moments. The one with, and I do credit you, seeing your book on Andy's desk. I remember that was a big one. My girlfriend had said to me, you like dogs. I was still using prong collars. And she says, but you like dogs.
That's a good one.
Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I do. You know, and I talked a little bit about this, the podcast I recorded earlier on, the solo one. I was a really gentle, mild child, you know, and then life.
Yeah.
Right. But I want to be gentle and mild to my dog and to, my partner and to my kids and to my friends, Why wouldn't you?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Dogs teach us a lot about the things we have to work about on ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Patience.
Yeah.
They're great reflections. You look back and you say, oh, what are you trying to teach me now, dude? And they teach us about patience. They teach us about anger. They teach us about resentment. They teach you and spite and everything. And he said, I don't have any of those things in me. And and the dog just gives you.
Yeah, really. Absolutely. This has been wonderful. So thank you. I really
great. We should have a couple of beers and that would be a good podcast.
Yeah.
When they have a podcast, make sure you got your brews ready and we'll go from there. John, this has been a pleasure for me. I really sincerely appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Hang on for just 2 seconds while I finish the recording, okay? And I'll just because I want to have just a brief chat with you, okay?
Sure.
Thank you.